Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the on the 21st of 21st of March 2020, we're starting a look at the first televised story of the Season 20 Arc of Infinity with Part 1. Now, before we begin, I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware that because in 2019, YouTube was caught data mining the information of underage users, therefore violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, they enacted policy to scapegoat creators. What that means for this channel is I need to make it abundantly clear that this video is not meant for children. Yes, Doctor Who is a family show that children can watch, but this channel and this video and all the other videos on my channel will be taking a look at Doctor Who episodes from an adult perspective, potentially discussing adult themes and the like. So viewer discretion is advised. With that out of the way, let's talk about Arc of Infinity Part 1. And there's actually a lot to talk about here, because this is the first story of the John Nathan Turner era of the show, produced to really deal with Gallifrey. We are on Gallifrey from the beginning. There is some sort of creature made of antimatter, played by Ian Collier, who bonds with the Doctor in this episode, and specifically makes sure the Time Lords know that he bonded with the Doctor. Because, quite simply, bonding with the Doctor means that he can actually find a way to basically be there to create a sense of basically be there to create, to create for his own purposes. We don't know what this creature is, and of course, it happens while the Doctor and Nyssa are doing TARDIS repairs. Now, I will say that the Doctor, entire the entire story being built around with the Doctor and this in the TARDIS is actually really, really nice early on. It creates a really, really nice dynamic that we don't see a lot of. It's the dynamic that Big Finish kind of showed exactly how the story how the story works. It's one of those things where you have the plot being all over the place just a little bit, but you have this being really where the Doctor and Nyssa's friendship began, because really they don't do a lot in this first episode, which isn't a problem. This is actually a script by Johnny Byrne, who created Nyssa in The Keeper of Traken, which we covered a long, long while ago, it feels like, if I'm being completely honest. But their interplay together is excellent, and I really enjoy how the characters interact and have this sort of witty repartee with one another as they're going along each other's sort of they're going with each other's as they're building these repairs and they're making it to Gallifrey. But what else is interesting, we have just a lot of political machinations on Gallifrey. We have the first mention of, the ideas that this bonding messed with the Doctor's biodata extracts, which is a concept that doesn't get nearly enough credit here. This is where it originates from. I think it might originate from Deadly Assassin. I'm not entirely sure, but it's prominent here, and becoming more prominent in the Eighth Doctor book line, which is so it's interesting to hear them mention that here. But you have the bonding, which is actually kind of a cool effect done in the TARDIS. But you have the Doctor and Nyssa arrive on Gallifrey, make their way through, sort of wander around and try to get to the bottom of why they're being called back. And then the Doctor gets shot, and that's the cliffhanger. He gets shot by Commander Maxwell, played by Colin Baker, who, of course, will go on to play the sixth Doctor, after Peter Davison's run, which is quite funny because, this is the point where the Doctor gets shot by a future incarnation, and that's our cliffhanger, and that's a really, really solid cliffhanger, just a really great way of ending this first episode and giving us something interesting. But meanwhile, you also just have you have this renegade probably working with a Time Lord, because we see a collar, but we don't know who. But also you have a plot going on Amsterdam, as this pair of guys, Robin and Colin, have essentially made their way into Amsterdam. Robin doesn't have a passport. They go into a crypt to spend the night. Colin gets basically hypnotized and zombified. And I'm gonna be honest, the Amsterdam plot is a bit much here. Really, it takes the forefront because it's clearly a John Nathan Turner. Oh look, we got to shoot in an excellent, fun little location. Look at how cool we are. We got to shoot somewhere different, which isn't bad. It's not a bad things. But it's one of those things where there's you don't get to see everything. It's one of those things where you have the interestingness of the story built around there, but the Amsterdam story just isn't that interesting. Whereas perhaps we should have been focusing more on Gallifrey and that specific plot line, not everything. It's different, and it creates something new. But other than that, you actually have a really, really solid start for this story, which is weird because this is a story sometimes people hate. It's not perfect. It's draggy and very 1980s, but it's definitely interesting. So overall, I would have to give part 1 of Arc of Infinity an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 22nd of March 2020, and I just finished watching part 2 of Arc of Infinity. The second episode of this 4-part story, and the episode that reintroduces Tegan Jovanka on Earth in Amsterdam, as Colin was her cousin. Now, this episode actually does a good job of integrating the Amsterdam scenes with the Gallifrey scenes. That does mean that the renegade villain character only is in the background. Though fear not, that that doesn't mean his presence isn't felt, as he's involved in the cliffhanger, and which is interesting, a very, very interesting little idea, because you have this story doing this entire thing. It's a very, very interesting little bit of the story, as this is one where you get a lot of politics on Gallifrey, as the Doctor is essentially put on trial for his life. He wasn't shot and killed in the cliffhanger. He was just stunned, and in being stunned, it's one of those things where you have this things where thing where the story goes on and creates itself with these little ideas. Because and all the High Council members are interesting. You have Michael Goff playing Councillor Hedin, who you have Paul Jericho as the Castellan, and you have Elspeth Grey as Chancellor Thalia, and you have Leonard Sachs as Barusa in Another Regeneration. So you have all these great British actors coming together for their own little roles. Where we build to the issue of the warrant of termination, and termination is, as a punishment, is fascinating, because it's the idea that the Time Lord in question would be taken out of time completely, and it's only happened once before, and that was for Morbius, which is just, again, it's that's already an interesting little idea, and as well as just this fascinating point where you have the characters going on. It's very, very weird. Because of it, it does a bunch of different things. It's a really, really good idea of a thing where you have the plot going on. It's very, very interesting in that way, that you have this story, doing this story in this way, because obviously this thing will happen later on. It's also a very interesting story, because Nyssa actually ends up in the rest of the climax of the episode where the Doctor is terminated. To go through termination, Nyssa actually gets a staser and essentially attempts to save his life, and obviously fails. But it's actually really, really nice for Nyssa to have something weird. And this is also the origination of that famous Josh Snares meme of Nyssa, which is really, really fun overall just to watch, because that's just seeing Nyssa as that is interesting. It's because it's something different and something completely odd. Overall, it's and overall, it's one that I think just does such a solid job of being a story. But then you have the Amsterdam stuff, which is also interesting, because you have the you have the characters. You have the characters being interesting and having some fun, as you have Tegan reintroduced and basically trying to find Colin, who is her cousin, and investigate the crypt. Janet Fielding, it doesn't do much in this episode, but her introduction is still fun, as she at least seems a little more invested, and like it's a little more important that she's in this episode than the Amsterdam stuff was in the first episode, because it's different, but it's not the worst things. It's doing something different. you know, it's it's this weird thing, and then, but the weirdest thing in the episode is, it's a different little things, is is one of those things where you have the cosmic chicken, aka the Urgan, which is a henchman to the big bad who has a TARDIS, and we see it, and it is a costume. That is all I'm gonna say. It is definitely a costume. It's not a great thing, but it's not amazing. It's not very very solid overall. There it's different things. It's a story that's okay. So overall, I'm going to give part 2 of Arc of Infinity, as it struggles with the same problems but improves in other ways, another 8 out of 10. It is the 23rd of March 2020, and I just finished watching part 3 of Arc of Infinity, which is a slight step down from the previous episodes for mostly one big reason, and that is, this is the point where we reveal who the Time Lord on the High Council was, working with the villain this entire time, Counselor Hedden, played brilliantly by Michael Goff. I'm not knocking Goff's performance, because he's great, but the way the story is directed by Broughton Jones really doesn't keep that a mystery. It's like, it's treated as this big mystery, and it really shouldn't be. Like, it should be kind of a mystery, but not nearly as much to the extent that it should be, like, he was the only answer. Like, they have this they have this misdirection that's sort of supposed to be like, oh, we're actually doing this, and we're actually just making you think that, making them see that, that entire story, the entire story is built around, this misdirection for most of the episode, and that's not really all that great. Also, again, the Amsterdam plot isn't moving at a good pace. It's really kind of disconnected. I mean, this is the first point where it actually crosses over to the regular plot, and, well, actually affects the regular plot, like the Doctor, after termination, is uploaded to the Matrix, so that's where the Doctor is spending his time, I guess. Yeah, he's trapped there, by the villain, who is revealed to be Omega later on in the episode, and he's trying to return back to our universe, and Omega captures Tegan, because they make it to the crypt, and they get immediately captured. Omega realizes, oh, you've traveled in time with the Doctor, because you've been close to his bio data, which is interesting. It's an interesting concept that I don't think biodata gets nearly enough explanation here, as perhaps it should, because that is a good idea to have this whole thing, but it's even though it's not perfect, like it's still a good episode because of this. And the scenes in the Matrix are great, where with Tegan being used as bait, though it kind of does just damsel her more than I would like, because she's a character who deserves almost better than just being immediately damseled. You could really have gotten over the damseling of the character. It's something different, and something new for the characters, and something that I think could have been done better, but not perfectly well, as well as it maybe should have been. Like it's a story where things just build to an end quickly, almost too quickly, and that's not necessarily our best thing ever. But yeah, it's one of those. It definitely still got some fun stuff with the Doctor, Nyssa, and Damon trying to find out who the traitor is. Even if you get, something a lot more on the side of kind of a trouble, just the trouble of doing this story, not being the most interesting, but it is still interesting enough that you have a cool plot and something, and definitely something interesting to listen to, because it is so different and so fun. It's it's one that I do enjoy quite a lot. So overall, I would have to give Part 3 of Arc of Infinity a 7 out of 10. Alright, it is the 24th of March 2020, and I just finished watching Part 4 of Arc of Infinity, the final episode, which I loved watching because, well, it's, okay, it was about on par with Part 3. There are flaws. Yes, the story is flawed. Don't get me wrong, there are flaws, but I still love it, and I still think it's a good story, despite its flaws. And it's one that I think people perhaps have a tendency to exaggerate on how bad it might be, and exaggerate just on what the story has to offer, because this is a story where you have a real good sense of character development, some amazing stuff with the Doctor. The first half of this episode is the Doctor dealing with getting off of Gallifrey, and then once he needs to get off of Gallifrey, they immediately get to Amsterdam, and in getting to Amsterdam, it's the big rush to the finish, try and to try and find Omega and stop him before it's too late through some trickery. And it's pulse pounding action. It's great overall. But there's a big flaw, and that's that Omega's body is deteriorating. And it would deteriorate no matter what the Doctor did. So it kind of makes this entire last episode feel a bit pointless. I won't mark it off, and that's just the big flaw of the episode. But there are a lot of other things in the story that you look at and you think, oh, this is really fun. This is really interesting and cool, and we're doing something different. And that sort of distracts you from perhaps the big flaw here of the episode. And it's because it is doing something different and creating, allowing different characters to play around and be a different thing. And you have and you have just a lot of this great stuff as we go from the Gallifrey right to Amsterdam, and the chase through Amsterdam is fun. Like, you get to see the Doctor and Nyssa do detective work. The Doctor plugs himself into the Matrix again to try to communicate with Tegan, who gives away that they're in Amsterdam. And you have this idea that there's this whole idea that actually the Arc of Infinity, which was mentioned in the first episode as an area of space where, it's weak enough to sort of enter the universe of antimatter, kind of, not entirely, with enough power. Like, it's in very specific conditions. But they are done so that the characters have to go and do things essentially together. It is a matter of using a lot of the energy at the right time and for the right thing. That really makes this the heart-pounding race to the finish that it should be. And it gives an excuse for why the Doctor would have to go back to Earth, which I think is interesting. And once we get back to Earth, we actually get to see what the bonding did to Omega, and it made him look like the Doctor, which is great. It actually, Peter Davison then gets to do a lot of physical acting as the evil as Omega. He doesn't sound. He's still voiced by Ian Collier, who gives him that perfect voice as he's disintegrating, and they chase him throughout Amsterdam, which is actually a really good use of the location footage. Like, you have this location, you're doing this location, and they are, getting things, you're getting the location to do, to really show it off. And of course, once Omega is destroyed, utterly and completely, Tegan says she's gonna rejoin the crew, and that's the end of the episode. We don't even get back to the TARDIS, leaving a nice little story gap there, which we'll get back to later. And I will say that the direction of this episode is actually really good, especially on the location work. Ron Jones has directed this story, and there were definitely some points, especially in part 3, that I had some problems with. But when it comes to the location work in Amsterdam, he really does make the footage shine, much like Michael Hayes did for Paris way back in City of Death, which we covered a while ago. It's knowing what it makes it look, and once this story is eventually released on Blu-ray, I can only imagine that it's going to look amazing overall, and just look, it's going to look really, really good. Like, really, really good. It's, because it's, you know, full of color and just some amazing stuff. I also really like the makeup job on the deteriorating version of Omega, and the music choices. They're a very interesting music choice. They sort of they feel kind of Dutch the way they're written. And there's a lot of stuff done in silence. Though I do kind of wish that Tegan had more to do than just be a damsel in this episode. Like, she doesn't ever get really a redemption. Like, I don't want to say redemption, because that makes it sound like she was, like, completely, like, she failed in some way, but she didn't. She was just captured. She just doesn't get to sort of actually get anything too terribly interesting to do. But overall, I really, really enjoyed Arc of Infinity. It's part 4. It's a good story, and I would, it plays some fun stuff with Gallifrey here, and it brings back Omega with a different take on the character, it is a different take on the character. It isn't necessarily the take of Stephen Thorne, the original actor who played Omega. It's much less shouting. It's much more refined madness into just desperation, because Omega has already failed before, which I think is an interesting reflection of what happens to the character, and who the character is, because that's interesting. But overall, I would give part 4 of Arc of Infinity a 7 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average them out to give Arc of Infinity a final score of 7.5 out of 10. Because this is a good story, and it is one that I will actually say is pretty underrated, as a lot of people don't like it. I think it's actually a pretty good Peter Davison romp. So, thank you everybody once again for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment down below your opinions of the story. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I know people probably disagree. Let's get a conversation going. Subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we actually look at what happens in that story gap that was created at the end of this story, with the first installment of the 2016 Fifth Doctor trilogy with The Waters of Amsterdam.